I've wanted to do a making of video for a few years. I was going to do it for my Village review, then for Ragnarok, and I just never got around to it. So for those of you interested in the process of making these larger videos, I'm going to show you how I do it. When I'm playing a new game, or even an old one that I'm planning a video for, I set up a recording buffer through OBS, and anytime something happens in the game, or I see something I want to mention, I save a clip of the last 60 seconds, which saves into my OBS recordings folder as a replay file. I'll also have a WordPad file open to jot down my thoughts. That doesn't happen with every clip I record, because some clips are multiple examples of the same thing. In some cases, I'll also be recording entire playthroughs, which I can later scour for general footage and story moments or whatever else I may need in case I didn't get a clip of it. You may ask, why make all these clips when you can just record the whole game and grab the clips you need later? Well, as you can see, my complete footage is about 18 hours, and diving into that mess every time I'm looking for a 5-second example of something is a nightmare. That's how I used to work a few years ago, and it makes the editing process so much longer. While I'm playing the game, I'm usually starting with early parts of the script, a few paragraphs here and there for general thoughts, making notes of points I know I'll want to eventually cover. And once I have an idea of where I'm going with it, and I finish the game, I start organizing clips. I import all the 1-minute clips into Adobe Premiere, and I go directly to the end of each clip to find the moment it showcases. Like the first clip here that shows the starting attach cases and the handgun charm. I'll clip a few seconds of it, name it case, drag the clip up to another track to separate it from the full clip, and go to the next. Here we have a clip of the first mutating enemy, killed by a knife, showing off this new mechanic. And we do the same, label it knife kill, drag it up, and go to the next. Depending on the game, there could be 20 to 400 clips to organize this way. It's tedious, but once you get to the later stages of editing, it's incredibly useful and a big overall time save. Clips are set to record a full minute because sometimes I'm not just clipping a moment, but an entire combat encounter or story scene. Sometimes I need to have footage of what sets up a certain moment, so a minute gives me enough time to work with, even though in the majority of cases I'm only using the last 10 seconds or so. This process goes on for a while, and when I finally get that last clip labeled, you'll see why they're all on the upper track. I can just select all the separated and labeled clips, cut them out, paste them to the side, open the sequence tab at the top and select close to gap, and now all my clips are together and I can delete all the leftover footage. But we're not done, we have to categorize. In RE4 Remake, general categories of discussion will be weapons, knife and parry, melee, enemies, bosses, graphics, bugs, characters and story, combat, inventory, crafting. There's a lot to talk about. So I go through the clips selecting whatever applies to one category. Say we pick knife and parry. I select anything having to do with that category, cut it out, and do the same close to gap thing to put them all together. Then I assign it a color, and I put an adjustment layer on top that I simply use to give the category a name. And there we go, we have a collection of knife and parry clips. After I've gone over my large collection of clips several times and organized everything nicely, I end up with a wonderful set of colored categories containing everything I'll be referencing in my review, or at least a lot of it. Next up is the audio process, which is far less interesting. Actually, it's the part I dread the most about this work. It's boring and it takes forever. Basically, I'm just cleaning up waveforms of my recorded script and organizing the audio, cutting out mistakes, punching in additions, and then I render the full audio and import it into Premiere. And instead of immediately starting to insert clips to align with my audio, I prefer to just listen and mark topics. Here, around the 1-minute mark, I'm talking about survival horror and action horror games in general. So I mark where I'm going to put clips of games like Silent Hill 2, Dead Space, Signalis, and then later in the video you see where I start marking specific topics and moments from RE4. This goes all the way to the end. It takes about an hour, maybe 90 minutes, and at the end I've got a full timeline of clip markers, and I can start inserting clips. If it's a shorter video, I'll start piecing together the whole video all at once. But something this big requires focused organization. If you look at something this huge, it can be intimidating and exhausting to think about how to get started. So I'll identify a specific section of the video to work on, and I'll cut it out of the main timeline and place it somewhere separate so I'm not distracted by the rest of the work ahead of me. It really helps me not get overwhelmed. This section talks about how RE4 Remake pushes harder on survival horror elements, mainly about map exploration and resource management, two categories that already have clips ready for me. Here I'm talking about checking the map as you're moving about, and backtracking being a rewarding experience from using keys to unlock treasures. That's all found in my map backtracking category. I set the clips to align with what I'm talking about, and then I move on to the parts about resource management. I continue this process until I have a nice, mostly complete section that's ready to be reinserted into the main timeline. There's a missing cabin fight clip from my professional run because I haven't imported that recording yet, but I'll put it in later. I cut this section and paste it back in the timeline, and we have our first piece of the video. And we just repeat this process. Find another isolated section, align the clips, and slowly build the review. Eventually we end up with this. Here's the complete timeline for the RE4 review. It looks kinda messy, but it is all together, everything in its right place. If I'm working on a video that's going to need to be re-edited over several weeks, something like my upcoming Silent Hill video, I'll actually color code each section of the timeline, making it easier to find things I may need to change or add to later. A color organized version of this timeline would look something like this. Much nicer. At the bottom you'll see the blue tracks, that's background music, sound effects, and game audio, set to fade in and fade out when needed, and up top there's things like text overlays, graphics, all that stuff. When it's done, I render it and upload, and I guess something like this total, considering playtime, is about 60 to 100 hours of work. And if I don't organize clips like I did in this video, that time can easily double. My first God of War video took over 300 hours to make. That's how disorganized I was back then. And that's it, I guess. That's the process. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's how I work. I welcome all comments telling me how things could be more efficient or about other shortcuts I'm not using. I'm sure there's all kinds of editing and organization tricks I don't know. It's not like I'm professionally trained. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you've learned something here. I hope it's given you a better appreciation for the sheer amount of work that goes into these videos. Sometimes I wish I had one of those channels where I just spoke over general background footage. It would be so much easier. But alas, I'm obsessed with detail, and I think it's really important to show visual examples of what I'm talking about, especially since I'm covering mechanics more than story and visuals and all that. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. If you'd like to support this work in the future, I have a Patreon, you can follow me on Twitch, or just keep coming around and watching videos and leaving comments. It's all appreciated. I don't know how much more RE4 stuff I'll be doing. It may have run its course for me, but we'll see. There's some fun stuff coming out soon. Take care.